Good afternoon, James. We got quite a lineup here today. Along with my co-host here, John, you can't see me, Cena. We have Daniel Martinez, the former chief historian at the USS Arizona Memorial, and we'll be talking a lot about that. And we also have another guy who's into history quite a bit. He's an old friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he's the guy that I'm with for my not-for-profit. Bill Suki, Mr. Bill Suki, an Emmy Award-winning producer and director of Silver Wings and Flying Dreams, right?
That's correct.
And you also did a lot of TV shows for Orlando.
Yeah, I produced over 2,000 hours of television and 15 different documentaries for PBS so far. A lot of them have been history, though. So it's the last one, Silver Wings, Flying Dreams, has been a real pleasure to work with the WASP for World War II.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to Daniel first because he flew all the way in from Hawaii, with the national parks. And you're from, you live in Hawaii now, but you weren't
born and raised.
Yeah. Tell us about your history.
Well, my mom and dad met in Lone Pine, California. My dad had fallen in love with my mom, and they ran off and got married. He was at that time in the Navy, and he was did his training down in San Diego, and he was going to be later a tin can writer. So he was an IC electrician, and set him up for when he left the Navy, looking for a job in that post-Korean War period, and he happened to get a little company that was started up near the LAX airport, and it was called I think it was called STL at the time, Space Technology Laboratories, and it grew into a huge company, and he was part of the early space program. That's what he was involved with. So it was NASA had all these umbrella companies working, and my grandfather my father worked on the descent part of that. They had to have all the electronics for the landing on the moon, so you could make sure you get that engine started. And of course, we know that some of the astronauts got stranded because they couldn't get back, and they used to regulate the engine. And my dad was involved in that, at TRW at the time. And so the TRW company retired for that. I'm very proud of my father because he was part of a team that reached out to get these talented people, what we would term, quote, minorities, and they would reach out and bring these people into the space industry. So it was a company that was real special to him, and I was able to go with him sometimes to get permission to see with these satellites and everything. We were at Cape Kennedy several times, and for launches, and to see one of these rockets launched at night is almost like that must be what God looks like.
Yeah, we got like one a month up lately going off here, Dan.
Yeah.
But I want to know, tell our listeners how you got involved with the national parks and especially the memorial.
Okay. Well, I told you my dad worked for the space industry. That meant my mother and 5 kids traveled over the continent to Florida. And so from California to Florida, there was a thing called the national parks. My first real national park that I went to was Grand Canyon. And then Carlsbad Caverns was like great. But the one that I was taken to after we got settled down, I think I was bugging my father about it, but we went to Gettysburg. And when I went there, this park ranger came out, did a small talk about the battle, and said, hey, please, if you want to stay, I have a little presentation I'd like to do for you guys. Well, we stayed, and he came out dressed as a Civil War soldier, and then went through the whole manual of arms and fired the weapon. And I said to myself, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but that's what I want.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't as easy as that, but that's what I want, carried me through my years and my college years, and I found out that there's an opportunity to be a park ranger at Little Bighorn Battlefield. And I applied along with about 75 others to be a summer seasonal. I was lucky enough to be picked, and then I fell in love again, and this time I fell in love with the National Park Service. I didn't know how I was going to get to that point of being a permanent employee, but there were opportunities at a place in Hawaii called the USS Arizona Memorial. And it was a hardship park because of cost of living, getting there, sustaining yourself, and I didn't care. I'm going, and that's where my grandfather was, and my grandmother, and my mom, who was 9 years old at the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor. She had just finished her hula lesson the day before with Hilo Hattie. She was a happy girl. She was at Mass that morning with my grandmother, and my grandfather was just getting off work. He ended his work at the Red Hill Project, an underground storage tank facility on Marvel, and he was standing with the other bosses as they had something fly over. Well, it wasn't just flying over, it's probably less than 100 feet above them. And as they looked towards Battleship Row, they saw this huge water geyser go up, and they knew what it was almost instantly. And it was a bunch of my gods and a bunch of goddams and all of that, all rolled up into this emotional part for my grandfather. I say emotional because I did oral history of my grandfather, and he got up from the interview about 6 times, just walked away. And if it wasn't for my grandmother, which you can hear her say, you got to get back there, he's got this for college. And he did. So I didn't realize at that time that this experience of a civilian that works for the military is now involved in the beginning of World War II for the United States. It never left him. And as I did interviews later of oral histories of those that were there in the military and those civilians, it became patently involved that it was an experience that was indelible and would never leave them.
Yeah, you interviewed quite a few of the survivors, have you not? Do you have an archive or something where people can go to?
Yeah. We did well over 300 plus interviews. We would go to the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association when they had their meeting, and the best, opportunity we had was when they went to Las Vegas, and we went with 2 film crews, and we recorded probably more than 20 hours a day. It was incredible. And my last interview was an African American mess attendant who's on the show that I did. That's still on, and it's called Erased, and it was a program that we did on the Pearl Harbor about the black mess attendants and what happened to them, and how this one that went on later to, after the war, had another life to live, right? And he went to law school, and he would later become a prosecutor for New York, and he would also work with the FBI for civil rights. So how does that rainbow of life go from Pearl Harbor to that? That's part of the after story of these wonderful men and women that took on and were part of a simple phrase: remember Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, and you did 34 years with the Pearl Harbor National Memorial, is that right?
Right. It had several names. It was USS Arizona Memorial. Went through. It was like the site that couldn't find its place, but it does right now. And it was like all of you who served in the military or in any public service. It is a special, it's a special responsibility you get, because you now, as I speak about the National Park Service then and in the past, it was an honor to wear the uniform. And let me tell you, the National Park Service employees that uniform is as important to them as it was to those in the military, that we were representatives of our government, and we were proud of it. And so, when I met these veterans and did their interviews, it was it was emotional. We became friends. I kept in contact with many of them, but the 9 times out of 10, the family member came up to me and said, Daniel, they never told us that.
Yeah, I find that doing my YouTube show, I've had some guys come on and after it's over, they said, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I opened up like that. But it's good to open up like that, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you did a career though of 44 years with the
Yeah,
national parks. You must have met a lot of great people.
I met presidents. I met senators, Senator Dan Inouye. I not only met him, but he knew me and I knew him, and he would be one of our regulars to come speak when he was in town, not being in the Senate. He was special. Spark Matsunaga, who was also a veteran. These were Japanese Americans that found themselves too by joining the military, in spite of some of the prejudice that was obviously there. That not all Japanese were the ones, and especially for Japanese Americans, felt the burden of that. And there wasn't a mass relocation in Hawaii, but there was some people that were isolated and put in custody. But the National Park Service has
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. We got to take a little break right now. Yeah, Daniel was talking about the Japanese Americans, and I got a comment on that, but I want to have finished his statement first.
the thing of the Japanese American experience, especially, was profound because a large number of Japanese Americans from Los Angeles were taken to camps, the largest one, Manzanar, which is now a national park. My grandfather settled in Lone Pine, which is just a matter of miles from where Manzanar was, and he used to go and repair the fencing around it. He had many skill sets, and one of those fencing. When he came back from Hawaii in 1946, and he took up that work, I remember as a young boy going there, and he was repairing it, and there's like a cenotaph, and it's all white, and it's in Japanese kanji on there, and people had been shooting at it, and they had been doing abusive things to it. My grandfather brought all of this fencing gear and metal stanchions and put it around it so that people could get to it. He would clean up the glass bottles that had been thrown at it. So you could see that people had some emotional feelings toward it. And as a young kid, I was a little, amused but didn't really understand what he was doing till later. I asked my grandfather in his oral history, were you mad at the Japanese? And he said that, if I can get emotionally ready to say this, he said that about that bitterness brings on more bitterness, and if allowed, time heals all wounds.
Yeah, that's true, very true. I told you the other day, you did a nice presentation in the plantations.
Thank you.
All about Pearl Harbor. I did not know you were coming to the last minute.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have got your word out about you, to everybody. But when you talked about the Japanese Americans, I had a fellow on my show, my YouTube show, who was one of those that after Pearl Harbor, they took him, his parents, and his brother, and they put him in one of those intern camps. And his business and his house was within 200 miles of the coast.
Right.
So they lost their house, they lost the business, and the only way he got out of there was to volunteer for the United States Army, him and his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And they fought in the all-Asian outfit, which only fight the Germans.
Right.
And I said, well, what was that like? He says, I was one of the lucky ones. I only got shot once. Most of my guys got shot 3 times, but we didn't have a whole lot of replacements, But it's amazing that history And this guy here got a lot of history too, Mr. Suki. And we're going to go to him a little bit to talk about, with World War II, and then all of a sudden we needed pilots. You want to tell us a little bit about it, Bill?
Yeah, first, just about the Japanese thing, I actually have a close friend that his father was in one of the camps. And the only way he got out of it was that he joined the service. And that was they were given the option. You can either stay in the camp or you can become a part of the service. And he fought actually in the Pacific. He was an interpreter the whole time. And he said that his father eventually became a very famous artist that did national parks.
Oh,
He
darn.
has all his
Paintings.
of national parks, but we're discussing now about doing a documentary about his father's life, how he lost everything because they had their farms in California.
Right.
They came, and what he did was he drew pictures of everything that happened to him. And
I've
it's pretty
seen some
emotional
of
to
that.
see what happened, and then he became, worked for the war and came back. But it's a very dark story
Yes. And
of a time. But it's amazing that you're in Pearl Harbor, because that's with the women Air Force service pilots. That was the trigger
Yeah.
for all these women going, "Oh my God, I have to do something." And when we went to war, all of a sudden they decided, well, we need more pilots, not to fly overseas, but all of our guys were going overseas. So all of our pilots were fighting in the war, and there was no one here to train pilots and to ferry the planes.
right.
So they actually finally broke down and said, okay, we'll allow women to do it. They already had to have pilot's license, which in the 1940s was almost unheard of.
All right.
But over 25,000 of them had licenses and tried to get in, and only just over 1,100 were accepted. But we definitely wouldn't have won the war without them, because they flew over 60,000 miles, and every plane that we had, they would ferry. They were mechanics on the planes, and making the documentary with them, like you were talking about when you interview people.
Right.
I got to interview, so many of these women in their 90s, and a lot of them never spoke about what really went on, how they were treated,
Yep.
how they, because they weren't actually in the service. They actually weren't given veterans' rights. Once we won the war, they just told them to disperse, goodbye. And they had to fight. It took them into the 1970s to get veterans' rights, and it wasn't until 2010 that they actually got the medals that they deserved.
Right.
But talking to those people, it's amazing when you can sit there and talk to people that lived it, that were there. And one of their stories was great. It was the first B.
29, right?
Yeah, the B-29s, when that crashed, when Boeing, the first ones crashed, men wouldn't fly them. They called it the Widowmaker, and they said, it's not a safe plane. So they actually trained the Wasp to fly the B-29s, and they flew them to all the places here where our guys were coming back from Europe.
Right.
And then they would come out and take off their hats, and they would see that there's women flying these planes, and it kind of made them, okay, I guess we have to fly these.
Yeah.
But we're doing documentaries. I've done a number of things in history, and World War II was always my favorite. My father was under Patton. He was a staff sergeant for the motor pool. He helped build the Jeep that Patton used. And so I grew up with all these stories of Battle of the Bulge and, combat on TV. You watched all these things about how wonderful, like I want to be a soldier. Didn't happen. So I became a filmmaker instead. And,
Oh, you got some
I'll
great
do that.
films out there, Bill.
yeah, it's just a wonderful thing, because when you can find parts in history that people don't know about. Most people didn't know about the women Air Force service pilots. I didn't know about them until I started researching them, and someone came to me and said, these people, it's a bunch of them living in Florida. You should go talk to them.
Right.
But it's amazing their stories, what they had to do, and the way they were treated, and how great they were. You know, they just loved this country. They offered after the war to stay in for $1 a year. They said, if you can't afford us, that's okay. Just give us $1 a year and we'll still stay in, because they just wanted to be part of the Air Force or the Army Air Corps at that time.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when we started this show, Unsolved History, we ran across veterans, and we did run across those that were females that flew, because it was part of a story we were trying to tell. But it became really apparent that not only there was unsolved history, but there was history that had not really been revealed of World War II, not because of secrecy, but people, you know, just didn't know that these women did this, and the Tuskegee Airmen, they didn't know about that.
And the Indians?
And, well,
Yeah.
oh, that's a whole different
That's a whole
subject.
different
Yeah.
subject.
But you had Native American code talkers, and I took a code talker. I was selected by somebody in Washington to be an escort for a Navajo code talker to go back to Iwo Jima.
Wow.
And so we had this two Native Americans, park rangers from that site for the National Park Service. They came to Pearl Harbor. We had the opportunity of taking him to the USS Arizona Memorial, getting him a tour of Pearl Harbor, and he said it was as remote as, you know, being in space. He didn't know where Hawaii was. And then from there, they flew us onto Iwo Jima. And I'll tell you what, if you've never been there, and I've filmed there a couple times, but I'm just getting a little chicken skin, because it's
So emotional to me.
yeah, it's a torture.
Normandy, any of those places.
Yeah, but this place has no color really to it. It's a tortured landscape, a volcanic island. And when we went on there, we took him down to the beach where he landed. And he said, I landed right here to save my life, because it was kind of a lava wall there, and Suribachi above him, and the Japanese were shooting down. And so we took him, and he wanted to have a moment. And he went and had his moment. We just were waiting, and he comes back, and all of a sudden we turn around, he's there, and he's got his American flag. And he launches his war song and sings it. Fortunately, we were rolling. We were recording it, and it had you could hear the tongue of the warrior heaving, and he told a story. I says, well, you must have been terrified. He says, it was very scary. And I ran across it. About 3 Japanese soldiers were about 50 yards away and fired at me, and they missed me. And I raised my fist, and he says, you won't kill this Navajo today.
Wow, you know, one of the things about Central Florida through YouTube, I record a lot. I've had guys on from Iwo Jima. I had guys that were at Pearl Harbor, and I could just imagine with your experience, because you've been with everybody. You've been on the Discovery Channel, the Military Channel, the Geographic Channel, Fox, CBS. But now you've made it to Central Florida. So
Yeah, I've reached the pinnacle.
yeah, sorry about that.
No.
Military history to me is always, especially World War II, because as I told you before, and Bill knows,
Yeah.
a lot of my uncles were all in World War II.
Right.
And what went on in World War II about the different ethnic groups that did this and did that? You know, African American, Japanese Americans. It's amazing, you know, that once you realize that we are Americans and we've all made sacrifices.
Yeah, it's truly one of the things that I think that all the documentaries, in particular Ken Burns in his series on World War II, brought out all of these, you know, elements of the war that were basically untold. People didn't realize it. And, you know, the home front, that story wasn't told. He did a beautiful job of doing that. There's been a number of books. Atkinson's books, The Army at Dawn tells you about the North African campaign and the kind of detail where your father was, in part of that. And I just thought, World War II was Europe, World War II was Japan, but it wasn't. And so when I was selected as a presidential counselor at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, I was sitting around with all of these scholars, and I said, what the hell am I doing here? And part of it was that I had the experience, and I was a historian at Pearl Harbor. I think that those years that I was on the presidential counselors, I got to meet people that wrote those books and shared stories. And then the museum itself is that you have to get there. It's just one of those places like Pearl Harbor. You have to get there. And I think it's your duty to do that.
Yes.
Because, I serve, as a member of the American Legion and as a son, and I treasure that. And my neighbor, Fran Riddell, next door, he is a guy that places, has every December 7th weekend that comes up. There's one flag for every casualty at Pearl Harbor. And so there's this array of small flags like the one you have right here. And it's set up by like the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts come out, and he gets them to do that. And it shows them and it gives them a identity of patriotism and commitment.
And how many flags would that be?
1,107 for the Arizona, over 2,000 casualties, including civilians and including other branches of military. And one of the stories that I'm working on right now, writing about, is the Honolulu Fire Department, 7 December 1941. They lost 3 of their, company, these fire companies that went to, in particular to, the main airfield next to Pearl Harbor, Hickam, and they were killed. And their graves, every December 7th, I make sure that a flag is placed on their graves. And believe it or not, sadly, and I'm going to work harder on this, no flowers by their own fire department.
Really?
Yes, it's disturbing, and I'm sure I'm going to hear from it if anybody's listening. But we have to have a commitment to those that gave their lives. And boy, Harry Pang, a young fireman that died there. I met his son, and so that's part of it. I don't know if this is the time you want me to do that, but I think that President Bush, when he came in 1991 for the 50th anniversary, probably said it best. And we could see from there over to the USS Arizona Memorial. It wasn't more than a quarter mile away. The president got up and he started with his speech, and I had no idea what he was about to say, because how do you address this? Well, he was masterful. A young speechwriter in the White House, a woman, helped him with his speech. I can understand Bill's feelings, and I wonder how I would feel with you. The veterans of Pearl Harbor, the survivors on this very special day. And I wondered if I could feel or would feel that intense hatred that all of us had for the enemy 50 years ago. As I thought back to that day of infamy and the loss of friends, I wondered, what will my reaction be when I go back to Pearl Harbor? What will their reaction be? The old veterans, especially those that survived that terrible day here. Well, let me tell you how I feel. I have no rancor in my heart towards Germany and Japan. None at all. And I hope, in spite of the loss, that you have none of yours. This is no time for recrimination. World War II is over. It is history. We won. We crushed totalitarianism, and when that was done, we helped our enemies give birth to democracies. We reached out, both in Europe and in Asia. We made our enemies our friends, and we healed our wounds. And in the process, we lifted ourselves up.
Very well said.
Nice.
You know,
Very
there's a saying that goes, you can always question the war, but you can never question the warrior. You know, we do what we have to do, and yeah.
It was one of the president's truly great speeches that he gave, you know.
But you've been all over Europe too. I've been to Europe too,
Yeah.
and you see how they rebuilt. I mean, the countries were totally destroyed, and they had to chip the cement off the blocks to rebuild. And it's beautiful. Germany's beautiful.
One of the battles that was just right after Normandy was at St. Lô, and it looks apocalyptic in these pictures. I mean, it's just this beautiful town destroyed. And you know, when you go to Europe, they really welcome you in Normandy because so many Americans go there. It's like going to Omaha Beach and taking a piece of sand, just to take a piece of American history back that was once foreign soil. The French have never, you know, got over the fact that these allies from America saved their country, saved them.
Yeah, you know, and I read an article about the Dutch.
Yeah.
How the families, they adopt a grave of an American soldier, and they go there and make sure that grave is, you know, taken care of, and they
That's right.
pay respects to it every year. But we're starting to run down. We got 15 minutes, and I want to get the word out about with you, Bill. Then we're going to go back to David.
Daniel.
Daniel. Why do I keep calling you that? Anyway, Daniel. My daughter told me, you got to stop doing that, Bob. Okay. But anyway, Silver Wings Flying Dreams, if somebody wants to get it, is it still out there, or where can they see it? And what other projects you have going on? Is you want to give out a website or anything?
Well, sure, you can just go to my website, which is just billsuchy.com, BILLSUCHY.com, and that has a bunch of things that you could go from there too. Silver Wings is on Amazon. If you just put in Silver Wings Flying Dreams in the search on Amazon Television, Prime Television, or go up to the internet and do it, you can watch the films there. And actually, it's in about 20 something countries right now on television. And Espresso Films in London, which is my distributor for that film, literally called me this week because our contract was over and said that they wanted to keep it because they're putting it on Pluto and Roku and
Wow.
all these other streaming things now because they thought it was that important. So I'm really happy.
It's a great documentary, and because like I said, I know Bill for quite a while. I have copies of it. I have copies that were signed by some of the lady boss.
You have
Yeah.
So that's
Very
I
nice.
saved that, you know. Yeah. So anyway,
Well, if they want to watch Unsolved History, it's on Amazon Prime, and you get to go on some adventures with me. I was just blessed to do that show. I've done a number of documentaries, and I think people don't realize the difficulty and challenges that a filmmaker has to put that thing together. And recently, the revolution that Ken Burns and all of us enjoyed was I was just sitting there shaking my head. How did he get there?
Yeah,
How did he get there?
it's different.
So if you go into Pearl Harbor, you have to. There's a reservation system. It's run by the National Park Service. It's like I think it's a $2 fee, and you get a ticket for your a boat to go to the memorial. There's a film there. There's a museum there. So you're not just going for a boat ride, which is sometimes how some of the commercial companies do that. I think that's irreverent. But the National Park Service and the United States Navy is taking you to the memorial so that you can pay your respects and in a sense, in a larger, emotionally touch the history of World War II, where its beginning was. And for me to have the honor to be a National Park Service interpreter, and when I say interpreter of history, starting at Little Bighorn and understanding the sensitivities and the history there, and then going to Pearl Harbor, beginning my permanent career, I'm the luckiest man in the world.
yeah, I envy you actually. You know, all the history that you've seen and been part of.
Yeah.
The hours of operation. You talked about $2 to get in, but It's an open,
Yeah, the $2 is a reservation fee, and if just for some reason you couldn't get there, you could be in a standby line for tickets that people either didn't make it or the tour company didn't get there. But there's a standby line. You could get to Pearl Harbor, and you can see the museum. You can look out at Battleship Row. I think as an American, it's you come to Hawaii and not visit there, we need to talk.
well, I went to Hawaii and didn't see it.
We need to talk.
I was on my way to Southeast Asia.
Oh, well, now,
I got off the plane, they filled it up, and then I'm back on the plane. That's all I saw.
well, you have an exemption.
All right, thank you, buddy. Yeah, so, and the website or anything they want to talk about?
Well, the National Park Service has a website. You go there to get all your information. We have a wonderful group of what's formerly the USS Arizona Memorial Museum Association. They run the bookstore there. And so you not only can experience being at Pearl Harbor, you can go into the bookstore and get a number of materials that will help you understand not only Pearl Harbor, but the war in the Pacific and World War II.
You know what? It's been great having you here.
Thank
Go
you.
on your computer, look
Thank you,
up
gentlemen.
Daniel Martinez. Look up Daniel Martinez, chief historian.
Former chief.
Former chief. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.